Story 1. A man tried to order for his date. She did not like that, but it was early in the date, so she said nothing. He ordered an expensive appetizer that she did not want. Only he ate it. She looked unimpressed but seemed to be trying to feign interest. When it was time to order dinner, he again tried to order for her. Something expensive, surf and turf. She said no thank you. She was a vegetarian, which had been mentioned before the date, and wanted the vegetarian dish. He did not back down and insisted she have the surf and turf. She repeated no. She would not eat it. He countered, saying he could afford it, so why not? She left. The vegetarian meal had been written down, but there was no opportunity to place the order. Story 2. I remember one time a couple was on their first date. The restaurant was empty, and the man was a regular customer, so I made sure they had a great experience. I gave them a free appetizer and some wine, and let the woman play her music on the speakers. When I was bringing them dessert, she received a phone call and was told that her father had died. The evening went from nearly perfect to probably the worst night of her life. Story 3. I have witnessed 2 failed marriage proposals. One was uneventful. The proposal happened, and she quietly said no. They both left looking dejected. The other involved a man who was an obnoxious jerk, and she seemed over it. He proposed at dessert. She said no. He tried to argue, and they ended up yelling at each other in the rain outside the restaurant. She was right to turn him down. Story 4. Had a customer who was meeting a man for a blind date. I saw the man walk into the room, scan the area, and then walk out. After a couple of lonely glasses of wine and constant checking of the phone, it became clear that he had bailed. I asked if she wanted to order a meal, but she declined. I gave her a dessert and told her the bill had been taken care of. Story 5. Former waiter here. The sheer number of dates I saw where one person talked endlessly about themselves without asking the other person a single question was mind-blowing. But I think the worst one I ever saw was when a man asked his date to quickly run lines with him for an audition he wanted to do. He seemed to think it was impressive, like showing off his acting skills before their food arrived. Not surprisingly, his acting skills were not very good. Then he said, "What did you think?" And instead of waiting for an answer, he started explaining the brilliance behind some of his acting choices, while his date half-heartedly nodded along and praised the performance. It was painfully awkward. Story 6. I have seen many, but the best was when a man brought in a canned Pepsi and simply asked for a glass with ice. He then offered one to his date. It did not go well. Story 7. I saw many good dates, bad dates, and everything in between. The saddest was a couple who seemed like a good match. The lady was very excited, but the guy was insecure yet successful. He was a Persian man in his early 30s. He arrived early and it was a great date spot. I chatted with him while he nursed a drink to calm his nerves. He was very down to earth and I felt we genuinely connected. She arrived excited, but then he talked about himself and his career for the next 90 minutes. I wanted to tell him to ask her a question, but he was trying to impress her and was a completely different person. Story 8. It was these 2 kids that I would guess were 12 to 14 years old. The boy's mother drove them to the restaurant. The mother planned to go to the bar so they could enjoy themselves. The boy would not let her leave the table no matter how many hints he and the girl tried to give. I saw that he was physically holding his mother under the table. The boy was so nervous that he barely talked to the girl. He mostly talked to his mother and the girl mostly talked to his mother. It was painful to watch. Story 9. When I was in college, I was working in a bar where a man left his phone in his jacket, which he left on the chair when he went to the bathroom. His girlfriend or wife immediately went for it, and within 1 minute and 45 seconds, she apparently found what she was looking for. When he returned, she started yelling and flipped the high-top table over. She ran out with his phone, and he ran after her. We just comped the check because no one wanted to interrupt that. I hope it was a scam. They deserved every single bite for free, but they didn't stay long enough to enjoy the results of their performance. Also, I watched all the color drain from that man's face, and he looked like a fish swallowed a golf ball. An epic performance if it was staged. Story 10. Not a waiter, but at the grocery store I worked at, We had a small dining area by the deli. Almost all the time, it was only used by people coming in on their breaks, mostly construction workers and other retail folks. One time I was put on deli duty during lunch, and a man came in and sat at one of the tables. We were not a full-service deli. If you wanted food, you had to order it at the counter and pick it up at the register. We did not serve or do anything tableside. A few minutes later, a woman came in and sat across from him. She looked really bewildered and confused. I was just taking care of things at the deli when I heard snapping fingers. I looked up, and the man was snapping his fingers at me, saying, "Finally, can we get some menus?" I just looked at him and gestured to the case in front of me, telling him that what he sees is what we have. He looked at the woman as if he had just been slapped in the face, then stood up, pointed at me, and called me a wise. I told him we were not a full-service deli, so he needed to order from the case and I would ring him up at the register. The woman was very red. I remember distinctly she was a redhead, and her face matched her hair. He stormed over to the case. I didn't feel threatened since the deli case provided a barrier between us, and it was about 5 feet tall, so he could not jump over it. He jabbed his finger at the case and started loudly telling me what he wanted. I just followed along, scooping and cutting. Then he turned around and said, "Hey babe, what do you want?" She looked at him, mortified, and said, "I don't even know your name. Why are you calling me babe?" I tried to keep a neutral face and waited for the next order. He shrugged, turned back to me, and told me to make her a sandwich. Again, this was a grocery store deli. We did not make sandwiches. I told him as much, but he argued, saying I had the bread. I did not. The bakery did, located on the opposite end of the store, the meat, the cheese, and the condiments. I leaned around, looked at the woman, and asked if she actually wanted anything. She said she did not and picked up her purse. He noticed this and immediately ran back to the table. The speed at which he did it made me toggle the switch on the phone by the register, which sent out a bagger needed at Register 20 message. Register 20 was code for the deli, and we did not have baggers. It was code for security. Luckily, he did not touch her. He was just panicking. She got up and hurried away through the produce section to the exit. He started to follow, but our security guard came around the corner. I pointed to the man, so security stopped him and delayed him long enough for the woman to get clear of the store. Then the man stormed out. She came back to the store a month or two later and came through my checkout lane. She asked if I remembered her. I said yes. I learned this man was a total sweetheart at the office they worked at down the highway, so she accepted his request for a lunch date. However, she did not know he planned the date at a grocery store deli. She thought the address he gave her was wrong and was just as surprised he was there. Of course, she did not know how much of a complete jerk he was. It turned out he hounded her at work so much she eventually complained, and he was fired. Story 11. A woman was engaged and wearing a ring on her finger. She thought she was meeting someone for a networking happy hour, but the man thought they were on a date. Story 12. While working at a small dessert shop, a regular customer brought her date in. Things seemed fine, but later that week he came in alone and tried to get my number. I, of course, told her as soon as I could. She was sad but grateful. The worst I have ever witnessed was when I was just another person eating next to a couple on a date. I was actually catching up with a friend, but we ended up not talking most of the night. Instead, we listened to a woman become increasingly erratic as she explained how badly she wanted to harm several people in her life. Her date just sat there, frozen like a deer in headlights. Story 13. I had a girl I went out with the night before come into the restaurant where I was working the next night on a different date and sat in my section. She did not know I worked there. The look on her face was priceless when I said, "Hello, my name is Ben, and I will be taking care of you tonight." Story 14. I was waiting tables at a mid-range Italian restaurant that tried really hard to be upscale. Dim lighting, wine pairings, Sinatra on repeat. One night, a couple in their late 20s came in, and right away the vibes were weird. The woman looked uncomfortable. The man was wearing a trilby and calling her milady unironically. They sat down. He ordered for her without asking and insisted she try the Chianti, because it has notes of rebellion, whatever that meant. She clearly hated it. At one point, he asked, "So, how many kids do you want?" I am not exaggerating, we were maybe 12 minutes into the date. She laughed awkwardly and said, "Wow, jumping ahead a bit?" And he replied, "Well, I just feel like we have something cosmic." She spent most of the rest of the dinner either pretending to text or sipping water and making eye contact with me like, "Please save me." I checked in with them and she said, "Actually, can I get this to go?" He looked crushed and said, "But we haven't even had the tiramisu." That's when I was going to ask you out officially. She just grabbed the bag and said, "I think I need to be somewhere that's not here," and tipped me $20 on a $30 bill. He stayed and ate the tiramisu by himself, said her aura was just too guarded, and asked if he could leave his number in case she called the restaurant. She did not. Story 15. The girl was actively using a dating application during the date, and I felt she was not being very discreet. A man once tipped me $100 to give a drink to a woman at another table, and he was there with his wife. Life is wild. Story 16. Not a waiter, just a barista. The guy spent about 10 minutes explaining to her how monogamy was a trap. She responded, "Oh, cool. Then let me tell you about this other guy I'm kind of interested in." Then he proceeded to call her a whore and loudly asked how many men she had slept with in Cuba, in my crowded cafe at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She denied ever visiting Cuba. Story 17. Not a waiter, but I once saw a woman storm out of a date in a very nice restaurant. The couple was seated at a table next to me. She got up abruptly and left just before the food was served. The waiters handled it discreetly. They brought a cover to keep her meal warm in case she returned and, after a generous interval, quietly took her plate away. The man waited for a while before forlornly eating his meal and asking for the bill. Story 18. Not a date but a breakup. I had a couple that would come in almost weekly for over a year, always very nice and generous tippers. Then one day they were both at the table, not saying much. The young lady had tears streaming down her face, and the young man had an incredibly solemn, distant stare. I knew they were breaking up, but my question was, why would you do this at the restaurant of your happy memories, or in public at all? Story 19. I have two stories, both of which I have witnessed myself. First, I was sitting in a Thai restaurant in the Trafford Center with my wife. There was a young couple at a nearby table. She was about 18 or 19 and he was about the same age. The conversation seemed somewhat forced because his mother was with him, saying nothing with a face like thunder. When he went to the toilet, she followed him. When they left her alone, she just sat there texting disconsolately. Second, at a Chinese restaurant in Oxford, a young couple sat next to us. He spoke incessantly about how well-traveled he was. I don't think I heard a single word from her at all. It was not a conversation. He was subjecting her to a monologue. He spoke at length about how he had visited a third-world village and lived there for a month. He did not name the village or country and did not say a third-world village. He made it sound like a theme park. He said he had eaten a dog while there. He also said he had experienced teaching underprivileged children because he had taught in some of the worst schools on the Isle of Wight. For anyone unfamiliar with the Isle of Wight, it is very affluent, very pretty, and rural. I imagine that the roughest schools there have slightly tatty wisteria and serve inferior caviar at lunch. Poor girls. Story 20. We had an older lady come in every week. She wore a different wig each time. She would ask to sit at the same table and request that we act like we had never met her before. Throughout the day, sometimes the entire day, she had multiple dates. These men would fawn over her. If they did not bring her flowers, it was over. She would ask for help sneaking her out of the restaurant after the man left. Sometimes it got awkward. She never paid. She also asked that we only address her as Tiger. It was strange. Story 21. I was not a waiter. I was just eating with my family when I was about 14. The section at my table did not have anyone opposite me, as my parents sat next to me. There was a couple around 18 to 20 years old who seemed to be on a date. The guy seemed to be trying to talk to her, but she would not put down her phone. She was constantly texting and taking pictures of the dish. Every now and then, She waved her hand like saying, "Sorry, just sending a quick message." Set down her phone for about 30 seconds before picking it back up and messaging again. I remember she excused herself to the restroom. The guy looked around and saw me looking at him. He half shrugged his shoulders as if to say, "Can you believe this?" I could only shrug in agreement. I think he finished his food quickly and ended the date soon after. She had not even touched her food yet. Story 22. Not a waiter, but the one that lives rent-free in my head was from a table next to mine at a birthday dinner. It was a very romantic setting. A man bent down on one knee and proposed. The woman accepted happily, crying. The whole restaurant erupted into applause, and the couple sat down to continue their dinner, aglow with happiness. About 30 minutes later, the woman received a phone call and was gone for another full 30 minutes. When she returned, the two of them were very stone-faced. They did not look at or speak to each other for the rest of the meal. Their table was positioned in the middle of the restaurant, so they spent the whole meal being silently observed by the other diners, who wondered what had happened on that call. It turned me off the idea of public proposals forever. Story 23. A friend of mine had a really bad experience while waiting tables at a small-town restaurant. I saw the man get down on one knee and open a box. His date said, "That is not the ring I wanted," and walked out. Story 24. As one of the closers, if anyone came in between 9 o'clock and 9:30 p.m., it was no big deal, but I made it obvious we were closing at 10 p.m. Anyone in after 9:30 p.m., I told that the kitchen closed in 15 minutes, and after 9:40 p.m., I told everyone it was to go only. The managers didn't like this, but I was the first to greet the people and did all the work in that last hour. I had the "I'm the captain now" vibes. A nicely dressed man came in at 8:45 p.m. and asked for a table for two. He declined anything but water until his date arrived. I did what I could to stay busy, but after 45 minutes, with 30 minutes to close, I approached and warned him the kitchen closed in 15 minutes. He said his person was walking in. A woman in yoga clothes walked up and sat down opposite him, never looking up from her phone. He ended up ordering for both of them because she wasn't present beyond physically being at the table. I got the order in, and as I was passing to another table, I heard him quietly pleading for her to give him a chance. I was pushing some older guests out of my party booth and didn't hear everything. Their food came up, and as I was dropping it off, she said, "It's just not the way I thought it'd be, so I don't want to do it anymore." His face was crushed, and his body language showed he was devastated. I automatically brought boxes with the check, and since she hadn't touched her food, I wanted to save time. I pretty much knew dessert wasn't going to happen, but the manager was out front, and I had to try that final upsell or be banished to the back section with the flickering light bulb. "Just ask if they want dessert. Just ask if they want dessert." I said it the whole way to their table. With a giant smile, I asked, "So, guys, you thinking about divorce tonight?" Cue my horrified gasp. The woman looked up from her phone and said, "See, Justin? Even the waitress knows this isn't working." Poor Justin just looked at me as I literally tossed the checkbook and boxes and said, "I'm so sorry, Jesus." The manager gave them a discount, and I never again offered dessert. Story 25. I quit my job after 4 months because I worked at a romantic place with a lot of dates, and my single high school self could not handle that. One time, I was pouring tea into a guy's cup while he was talking to a woman, saying, "You're so pretty," and other things. I turned to the woman, and she said, "You looked better in the picture." I laughed, and then they both stared at me. Story 26. There is always a date where one person continuously talks about themselves nonstop the entire time, like 45 minutes straight of just talking about themselves and never letting the other person speak. It is usually a man doing this, but I see women do this sometimes as well. Story 27. Mine is just the number of men who think it is okay to propose on Valentine's Day in an Olive Garden. Story 28. It's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. I worked at a Korean barbecue restaurant in college, the kind where food is cooked on a grill at the table. An obvious first date came in. The guy immediately dominated the conversation. I gave my spiel, but he cut me off, said he was going to order and handle everything, and placed a huge order. I went to the table to cook the food, but he insisted he would do it. I noticed he cooked the pork belly for only 3 minutes. I asked if he was sure it was done. He said, "I like it this way." I said, "Yeah, but what about her?" and pointed to the date. She murmured she liked it a little crispier, but he insisted it was better that way. I told them it is recommended to cook it longer to ensure it is safe to eat. I left to handle other tables. When I came back, he was still talking nonstop, food literally spewing from his mouth as he talked. His hands were covered with kimchi and meat juices. It was disgusting. Again, he went to cook the chicken, and I noticed it was severely underdone. I told my manager, who told the owner, who is actually South Korean. I am white, so I suppose I don't look the part. The owner went over and told the customer he could not let him eat the chicken that raw. It was a hazard. They started arguing, and in the middle of the argument, the girl got up and left with no goodbye. The guy followed her out, then returned alone, looking sad and confused. He sat down and continued to eat his entire order of severely undercooked Korean barbecue before leaving in a hurry after wrapping up. He tipped poorly. I can only assume his stomach immediately rejected the undercooked meat, so he had to rush home to get sick. It was a spectacle, and I am glad the girl got out of there without eating any of the undercooked meat. Story 29. Not a waiter, but witnessed an absolutely mind-bending date. A man brought his girlfriend and a couple of her friends to an Irish pub for St. Patrick's Day. They racked up a decent bill of $150. He made some excuse, and the table became noticeably tense. The flustered girlfriend paid cash on the table and went to the bathroom while the rest of the group collected their things to leave amid a pretty chaotic St. Patrick's celebration. She came back and the money was missing. The waitstaff came to collect the bill, and she started freaking out. The boyfriend was loudly swearing that he did not know what happened to the money. The staff was understandably concerned about how the check was being paid. The manager came over. The entire packed pub witnessed the commotion. Her friends were very embarrassed. The girlfriend was crying because it was a lot of money for her, and the man was freaking out about where the money was and why she was not paying the bill. The staff confronted him about the bill, and he screamed at her, using her name over and over, trying to prevent them from accusing him. While he was restrained by a bar back, another server searched the boyfriend's pants pockets and found the $150. They called the police on the man and dragged him out while he was thrashing about. The girl was trembling and crying, and the friends were shell-shocked. But the staff changed their focus. They consoled her. One of the servers sat with her, and several patrons pitched in to cover her bill. Soon, other patrons were also consoling her and offering support. Her remaining group stayed for another hour or so after the police arrived, getting to experience the kindness of strangers. But she had an uncommon name, and whenever I hear it now, I still hear that man yelling it out over the packed pub. Story 30. A couple came in arguing about whether they should break up or not. They then ordered separate meals and did not speak the entire time. They paid separately as well. Story 31. I'm not a waiter, but the couple at the next table was clearly on a first date. I was facing the same direction as she was, so I couldn't see her face, but I could see his and hear everything he said. When I say I could hear everything he said, I mean I don't even know what her voice sounded like because the guy literally wouldn't stop talking. I don't think she said a single word the entire date. He just talked at her nonstop for a solid hour. He didn't ask her a single question or pause to eat his food, just talked while chewing. I cannot imagine what was going through her mind during all of this. Story 32. Funniest. A guy was on his phone the entire meal, name-dropping like crazy. When dessert came, he finally hung up and said, "Oh, sorry, I was just on a really important call with Mark Wahlberg." For the next 15 minutes, his date pretended not to know who that was while he became more and more desperate to make sure she knew he was a big deal. He named about 30 movies, he sang some Marky Mark, and he even said his brother was a new kid on the block. This absolute queen just kept saying, "Yeah, no, sorry, not ringing any bells. New kid on the what? Who is Martin Scorsese? Is he new? Saddest. I worked for a while at a kosher restaurant that catered to a very ultra-traditional crowd. I saw a lot of first meetings for arranged marriages. The one that stuck out the most was a guy who spent the whole date criticizing her while she sat silently and avoided eye contact. He ate a full meal but only allowed her to have water. Their families sat at the next table, and nobody spoke up for her. I wanted to flip their table over. It was so horrible to watch. I hope they didn't get married. Story 33. I was the female half of several dates where the man just delivered an extensive monologue throughout the whole encounter. You wonder if you were going to get lockjaw from trying to smile politely. This happened in my 20s and in my 70s. Those kinds of men do not change. 100 years from now, it will still be the same. Story 34. The guy was in a metal band and spent the entire date playing his music from his phone for her to listen to. It was bad. She did not look like the metalhead type, which could have been, but it would have been unexpected given the way she was dressed. She just chuckled awkwardly the entire time. Story 35. My husband and I met while waiting tables. Every year we go to the restaurant on our anniversary, so maybe this counts. A few anniversaries ago, we were seated next to a couple on their first date. The man was so obnoxious that the woman handed me her phone when he left to use the restroom and told me to talk to men on her dating app for her because I obviously had better taste than she did. Story 36. Not a waiter, but I worked at Panera in high school. I was wiping down tables when a guy and girl were having a seemingly normal conversation. She then started playfully doing footsie with him, and he suddenly exploded. "I told you not to touch my shoes. I can't stand you." Then he stormed off. She just sat there stunned, and we made eye contact. I shrugged while breathing in through gritted teeth. Story 37. Not my table, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. This pretty, well-dressed woman was stumbling in my direction, so I moved forward to see if she needed directions to the bathroom. Before I could reach her, one of our attractive male managers walked out of the coat closet just as she was walking in front of it. It all happened very fast. She stumbled into the closet and pulled him in with her, shutting the door. I didn't know what to make of it, so after a minute I went to investigate, opening the door at the same time the bewildered manager was reaching for it, trying to show the now sniffling woman out. She was upset and intoxicated, and he was trying to escape. He gathered that she was on a date with her long-term boyfriend. This was an expensive steakhouse and they were celebrating a milestone, so she was convinced he would propose. When it didn't happen, she stormed out without telling the guy why she was upset. He was very confused until he went to look for her when she didn't return to the table. As a server, you see a lot of bad dates, couples arguing, and instances of someone being stood up. This one stuck with me. Story 38. Saw this one date at the bistro where the man was fully analyzing the menu, as if he was hunting for typos instead of just picking a meal. Meanwhile, his date was doing the vanishing act, scrolling through her phone, probably texting her escape route. Classic case of wrong priorities. Should have gone for simpler vibes. Story 39. Bartended for a long time. A well-known bachelor in town showed up and sat at the bar. I greeted him as usual. He said he was waiting for his date, another local. Before she arrived, I noticed he had 2 Bud Light beers in front of him that I had not served. He also had 2 more in his pockets. I said, "Jay, you cannot do that here. You have to leave." He shrugged it off and walked out. I am pretty sure that was their first and last date, and the first time I realized how much of an alcoholic he was. Story 40. I'm a bartender, not a waiter, but an apparent couple last month sat on our patio. It wasn't my table, but I ended up clearing their first course before I dropped off their drinks. As I was taking plates off the table from in front of the girl, she lunged forward and loudly asked, "Are you seeing someone else?" I'm naturally kind of jumpy, so I flinched a little. The guy said, "Wow, you're scaring her." To which the girl responded, "Are you seeing anybody else?" I put the drinks down after clearing the table and very much tried not to overhear anything else. Story 41. Not a waiter, but I managed a late-night burger place right next to the biggest nightclub in 3 towns. I was running orders when I looked up and saw a blinged-out diamond necklace almost blinding me. Then I saw the guy, and it took me 10 seconds to recognize him. He was a legendary quarterback, ranked in the top 10 ever. I brought him his order, and he and his girlfriend sat down. In about 2 minutes, she started berating him about how broke he was, how he was not the man he used to be, and kept going for about 5 minutes while he just ate his burger and fries. This totally pissed her off, and she threw her not-so-happy meal at him. He continued eating. She exploded and walked out of the restaurant, leaving him there to finish his food. He never batted an eye. Story 42. Not a waiter, but a cook. If we were having a 300-plus night and my favorite server was working, he always got the couple that broke up before their food order was taken. It was always a given, like death and taxes. Story 43. I was eating at a restaurant once, and the man at the next table was breaking up with his girlfriend. She was crying, but for some reason, everyone thought he had proposed, so people kept walking by and saying congratulations. It was torture to even witness. Story 44. Not a waiter, but I once saw a man try to impress his date by doing a magic trick with a bread roll. He accidentally flung it across the restaurant, and it hit another couple's wine glass. I am pretty sure that was their last date. Story 45. Not a waiter, but an ex-chef in an open kitchen. This one will probably get buried, but scene Valentine's Day. Table. Right next to the open pass, slap bang in the middle of the restaurant, so close we could hear the couple chatting. Semicircular booth around a round table, couples' backs to the kitchen. They both started off on the left-hand side of the bench. During dinner, the man was unloading his feelings towards her. How amazing she was, and so on. She was slowly edging around the booth, and he followed. By the time dessert arrived, the woman was pretty much on the right-hand side of the booth. He was still following her around. His next words were, "And that's why I've decided to ask you to marry me," showing the ring. She replied, "Are you kidding me?" She immediately got up and stormed out of the restaurant. He just sat there, not moving, not crying, literally just sat there. As soon as we, the staff, heard what she said and saw what she did, we dipped below the pass and gestured, "What just happened?" to each other. Anyway, he eventually got up and left. No one really acknowledged what had happened. He paid for everything, and we never saw or heard from him again. The restaurant has been closed for a few years now, but that one night was a night to remember for everyone involved. Story 46. I was sitting at a bar with two friends, one female. A girl sat near us and said she was meeting a Tinder date for the first time. She told my female friend that if it was going terribly, she might ask her to go to the bathroom, which would be code for "get me out of here." The man showed up and was as weird and unpleasant as can be. We were waiting for the signal, expecting at any moment, but no, she was enjoying it. He even went to the bathroom, and she was gushing about him. We were like, okay, what is going on? Story 47. I had a table of 4 on a double date. They looked very religious. The two women were both overweight and plain. The two men were, looks-wise, more attractive than their wives and also very into each other. My intuition was telling me the men were actually on a date and their wives were just along for the ride. I don't know if I would say it was going horribly. I felt bad for the women. I had another table that was a group of teachers out for a school dinner. One of the teacher's boyfriends tagged along and told us he was going to propose in Applebee's in front of all of her coworkers. He was sweaty and nervous the whole time. She said yes. I still laugh about that. Who does that? It was so cringy and I enjoyed every second of it. Story 48. Oh, I might have been one of those long ago. Well, not horribly, but I took my then-girlfriend to dinner at a kind of specialty restaurant for her birthday, and my coworker's wife was our server. I had only met her a couple of times, and we did not really know each other that well. But she was nice, chatted with us, and made it a really nice evening. We had a great date. At the end of dinner, the bill came. It was my girlfriend's birthday, so obviously I was picking it up. I grabbed my wallet and found nothing but a handful of lint and jeans. I looked around for my wallet and then realized that I had really left it in my other pants. I had changed before we left for the date and did not remember to move my wallet to the new pants. My friend's wife was not successful at keeping her thoughts off her face. She clearly thought I was some cheapskate pulling a stunt. I asked my girlfriend to pay the bill and I would pay her back. She was a little worried that I lost my wallet but was otherwise amused at the irony and my discomfort. We got back to the house, and sure enough, I had left it in the pants I took off. My girlfriend laughed at me and then put the pair I was wearing next to the pair with my wallet. So, she definitely was not mad. It was not until months later that I saw my coworker's wife again and could explain what happened. I don't think she believed me until my girlfriend assured her that no, I was not a cheapskate, just a dummy. Story 49. Not a waiter, but this guy I was seeing took me on a date to a nice restaurant. I thought we were a great match and things were going well. We ordered food, and then he told me he didn't want to date me. After we ordered food, there was no ride-sharing service back then, so we just sat very awkwardly throughout dinner, which took forever. It was a bullet dodged for sure. Every now and then, I hear from him, and he asks, "Why didn't it work out between us?" I have to remind him that he took me on a date only to say he didn't want a date. Story 50. One patron asked me, the host, to tell his girlfriend that we had a rule that one person could not eat all the loaded nachos. She called him out and ended it immediately. Story 51. So, not a waiter, but I am sure we are some waiters story. My partner and I are sitting in a restaurant after dropping our son off at university to start his first term. I am feeling all the feelings. Happy for him, of course, but also very sad. We order and I start crying. My partner holds my hand, but I just cry some more. He squeezes my hand and says, "Sweetheart, you need to stop crying because people are thinking it is me." Sure enough, lots of angry eyes are on my partner, who they likely presume is breaking up with me or admitting some fault. We laugh about it often, 10 years on. Still miss my baby boy. Story 52. I saw a woman stick a fork into a man's hand once, loudly banging the table all the way through his hand. Horrifying. The man wailed. Everyone else gasped. I heard a couple of "oh my gods" too. She threw food. It was their anniversary, a special date. Ambulance and police came. He still had to pay the check, poor guy. Left a huge tip. We had to clean up a mess of blood, bread, and wine. Luckily, their salads and entrees hadn't arrived yet. A few weeks later, they were back at the restaurant, still together. I moved on to another job, but I bet they are still together if they haven't killed each other yet. Story 53. Busboy at a nice restaurant. A middle-aged couple was sitting at a two-top table on an outside patio. Across from them was a boisterous group of 6, who were throwing money around. I bought a bottle of Dom Perignon for the couple to apologize for the noise as the group left. Apparently, the husband brought his wife to the restaurant to tell her he had an affair. He told her this over the champagne. She became very upset, loudly berating him and asking about what occurred sexually between him and the other woman. All the waitstaff walked by slowly and gathered at the bar to share what they heard. Story 54. My sister went on a date. He took her to a Thai restaurant so she could experience something new and tried to order for her to get something she liked. He proceeded to order her mild pad Thai and said something about how she was lucky he was from a big city where they get exotic food like pad Thai. Not only are we not from a rural area, we are from the Chicago area. There are 4 Thai restaurants in our suburb. He also did not remember that her dating profile pictures were all taken during her gap year in Thailand. Story 55. A place I worked had the breakup table. It was a half booth for 2, and I guess because of that, it was where blind dates and breakup dates always ended up. It was true about 90% of the time. Yo, leprosy man. You have 2 at table 11. Even the kitchen knew to hold the entrees or desserts until I gave a thumbs up. The other 10% were anniversaries or, I kid you not, failed proposals. It was unfortunate. Story 56. One time waiting tables at Olive Garden. A couple came in and the man proposed to his girlfriend. The girlfriend's response was along the lines of, "Are you kidding me?" "No." She then promptly left. Unless Olive Garden has significant meaning to your partner, it is not a good idea to do that. Story 57. I saw a girl show up for a date under the influence of unknown pills. The man she was seeing came there often with other regular customers who also happened to be there that night. Not only was she visibly impaired, but she also arrived with her dog. Her boss drove her there and sat with her outside on the patio, while the man was inside with his friends at the bar. I kept asking if the boss and the girl wanted any food until the boss finally ordered some. She ended up eating a salad inside with the regular customer, which was the extent of their interaction. Back outside on the patio, the food was nearly ready. She returned to sit with the boss but was unsteady and almost fell out of her chair. I did not hear what was said, as I was watching from inside. She swung to slap the boss, missed, grabbed his phone, and slammed it onto the concrete. I went outside and asked if I should pack the food to go, and he replied, "Yeah, that would probably be best. I doubt anything will ever exceed that level of chaos while I work there." Story 58. Oh boy, I have seen a train wreck or two. I bartended and waited tables at a local ritzy gastropub around 2018 to 2020 while going to school after deciding on a career change. One slower Sunday lunch, a gentleman drove up in a fancy BMW coupe. He was the typical high-earning, conventionally attractive aging bachelor of the area. He said he was here on a blind date but was early, so he ordered a double vodka soda and sat in a booth to slam his drink. Not 10 minutes later, a woman walked in. Similar age, but not very conventionally attractive. Longer nose, crooked teeth. But the dress she wore complemented her thin frame nicely. I showed her to her date's booth, and the guy's face went from a kind smile to looking like he just licked a lemon. She noticed. He ordered another drink right away and tried to order a boozy cocktail for his date, which she declined for a diet soda. I brought the drinks and gave them a few minutes to chat before getting their food order. But the entire time the guy was on his phone, looking sour and having a minimally attentive conversation with her. She was trying to talk, but he maybe looked up at her twice. Suddenly, he got up and left. I walked over to see if everything was all right and found the lady looking a bit sad with $60 cash on the table. I asked if he was coming back, and she looked at me with a tired face and said, "He asked me if I wanted to skip lunch and go back to his apartment, but I said no." Guess he didn't like that answer. She then threw another $20 on the table and walked out. Story 59. Here is a backwards situation for you. A strange assumption. My friend and I, both women, went to a buffet-style restaurant. They had a magician going around to all the tables, which looked like fun. He was indeed stopping at tables with no children, so he wasn't only there for kids. But he just wouldn't come over to ours. Finally, my friend went to the restroom, and I gave our waitress a tip specifically for the magician and asked her to have him come over. She said, "Does she want to see the magic or does she want to hit on him?" Like what? Neither of us had ever been to this restaurant before, so I don't know if they thought she looked like the type of person to hit on him or what, but really, we just wanted to see some magic tricks. He finally came by, did a few tricks, no one hit on anyone, and it was fun. Story 60. Not a waiter, but my friend in high school had a guy ask her on a date. She said yes, and he picked her up Friday night. He then took her to Burger King and told her what she could order because of the coupons he had. He also carried a Burger King cup in his car and proceeded to use it to get refills. She still dated him for 2 years. Story 61. Well, it wasn't so much a date as a family outing. When I was finishing college late, for various reasons, I had a part-time job waiting tables at a popular neighborhood restaurant 2 or 3 nights a week. I was also dating a much older man, Ben, about 45 to my 24, which is not so unusual in the gay community. I thought both were going pretty well, although he had very limited free time because he told me his job was so demanding. As a result, we always had to coordinate our schedules closely. One night we were supposed to do something, but at the last minute he canceled. Not the end of the world, and as it turned out, one of my colleagues called and asked if I could come in last minute and finish their shift, as they were sick. Why not help out a friend and make a little extra? Sure. Imagine my surprise when I came into the dining room and saw, at a table toward the back, Ben, with what were clearly his wife and 2 children. It turned out that one of the reasons he paid so much attention to my schedule was that his wife loved the restaurant, and obviously they could only go when I wasn't working. I nearly killed them with kindness. They never had such good service in their lives. I've often wondered if she ever figured out why, On such a nice night out, her husband looked so much like he wished he were dead. We had a good time together, but it wasn't as if my heart was broken, and my boss thought it was hilarious. They actually tried to come back a couple of times, he told me, but the way he raised his eyebrows at Ben finally convinced them to find another spot for family dinners. Story 62. An older woman on her first date after being widowed bursts into tears 5 minutes in. The man with her tries to console her, which only seems to upset her more. He stands up and loudly says, "You know what? Forget this," and walks out. The woman sat there for another hour, drinking water and weeping. 3 or 4 more parties were seated near her and, after a few minutes, asked to move. The woman never ordered anything, did not tip, had about 10 water refills, and left the table a mess. Story 63. I worked at a small Mexican restaurant. A man and a woman walked in. The man was dressed normally, he is also a regular. But the woman was all fancy looking and dressed up. My friend went to get their order, and the whole time the woman looked upset and refused to place her order. When the man finally asked what was wrong, she loudly said that she thought he would take her to a nice place, not some Mexican dump. The man said, "What do you mean? It is our first date. I come here often. Their food is really good." Then the woman said, "You got me all dressed up sitting in some dusty wooden booth. You have got to be kidding me. Take me home." The man told her to catch a ride. The man ended up staying and getting himself a plate of enchiladas. All of us felt bad for him being treated like that. Story 64. Not a waiter but witness to first date failure. Met up with some of my Navy friends for dinner at a sushi restaurant, and there was a table prominently displayed with candles and flowers, sectioned off with velvet ropes. A little into our meal, the couple arrived, and the girl was visibly impressed. Then, as they took their seats, the guy said, "Really romantic, right?" and went for a high five. She left him hanging, just said, "Yeah," and pulled out her phone to send a text. 2 minutes later, she got a call and said she had somewhere else to be. Story 65. We met online, chatted for a bit, and set up a dinner and movie date. I showed up early to the sushi place he chose, but it had closed down, like boarded up closed. I waited until the appointed time, but he was not there. We hadn't exchanged numbers, so I checked the app and saw he had messaged that he was running a little late. Okay, I picked a different sushi place across the street, told him where it was, and waited there. An hour late, he showed up apologizing. We went inside and he kept talking about the startup where he worked, though he was not the founder. It turned out he was late because he was making and playing with foam swords with some friends in another state. This was my wife's perspective of our first date. We have 2 children now. I still marvel at her unbelievable patience with me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.